Okay, is there any public here? Seeing none, we'll move on to board correspondence. We have we received a letter of resignation from Mrs. Lambert, and we're going to move on that issue under the board vacancy. So I guess I'll jump right to it. So Mrs. Lambert is retired, or excuse me, resigned for personal reasons. I'd like to thank her for her service to the board. And we have, the board has met and discussed what our options are. And we're going to, we've asked for Tim Hayes. He'd like to serve out the rest of that term, and Tim has agreed to do that. Tim won't be available until the September meeting to come on board, but he's got a good bit of experience, and for us it should be a fairly smooth transition in our operation. So I want to thank Susan again for the time she served. You know, bringing on a new superintendent is one of the biggest jobs you'll have to do as a board. So the advisory committees are noted in the attachment. Those are Paul's doing. I think we've all talked about it and agreed to it, so we all good with that? Anybody have any concerns? Okay. Okay, we'll turn it over to Mr. Berg.
Okay. The first item under my agenda is to discuss the district goals for 24-25, and to discuss the instructional side of the house. I'll ask Ms. Charlson if she would present on those, please.
Good evening, everyone. Are you able to hear me okay? Okay, great. So I will be walking you through the instructional goals that I know are linked in the agenda, if you'd kind of like to follow along. Before I begin, I just want to emphasize this year the administrative team really looked at the past few years of our goals, and there was a lot of them. And we really revisited the idea of SMART goals, and that acronym stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And so you will see within our district goals, there's 3 solid instructional goals based on SMART goals, and you will see data attached to those. And you may remember our strategic plan had a kind of a 5-year lookout, and so we use that same model in order to every year assess where we are data-wise within the goals. Some of our goals in previous years, it was hard to measure where we were and see are we making the progress that we're hoping to. So with that being said, I will walk you through the district goals, the instructional side. So our first goal is to implement strategies to support students in attending school consistently, thus decreasing chronic absenteeism. So we revisited a lot of ideas, and this one kept coming to the forefront, our chronic absenteeism data. And so we want to continue to really focus on that, get students here, and we looked at our data and we separated it pre-K through 6 and then 7-12. And I'm seeing there's a table missing, and I'll make sure to get that in. But overall, pre-K 6, we're hoping to decrease chronic absenteeism by 5% by the 28-29 school year. And then 7-12, I apologize, both of pre-K 6 and 7-12 are in that chart. And then 7-12, we're hoping to decrease chronic absenteeism by 10%. So currently, we use last school year as the baseline for our data. And so at pre-K 6, the average of the 3 buildings was 23.13%. And then the 7-12, which is junior high school, was 33.15. And remember, chronic absenteeism is 10% or more of the days missed. So 180 days, that's 18 plus days. And you'll also see the structure of our goals is slightly different. We wanted a better framework when we give you the middle of the year and end of year updates. And so you'll see the implementation, those are our thoughts of how we're going to be implementing this through the school year. And then the evidence, that's where we're going to be putting our notes, linking in items for you all to view with that middle of the year, end of year. So it's a little bit easier to read rather than that long, I think we're up to 20-some pages in our last goal. So we're really just trying to create something that is more precise for you to view. The second instructional goal is to cultivate a positive and inclusive school climate by reducing negative student behaviors and increasing overall well-being of staff and students. And so here, we used our PLC climate survey data. And if you remember, that's marked by the green, yellow, red. So green, those are our assets, and then the yellow and the red, those are the risk factors. And so what we decided to do was we want to obviously increase the assets while decreasing the risk factors. So again, we broke that up, pre-K through 12 staff, and then pre-K 12 students. Sorry, it is a little bit different. We did staff and students. And so our baseline, again, we used that same year. And so the 24-25 school year, we're hoping to have 36% assets and 64% risk factors for our staff, and then for students, 5% assets and 95% risk factors. And so you can see there's work to do, and we want to involve our students in doing that. Instructional goal number 3, utilize data-driven instruction, targeted interventions, and continuous professional development to enhance student performance on New York State regions and 3 through 8 assessments. So here, looking at the data, we're hoping to increase proficiency at the 3 through 8 level by 10% by that 28-29 school year, and then that's ELA, and then math 5%. And so you can see the incremental gains at each grade level that we're hoping to achieve. And we've really talked about, amongst our PDC committee members, really restructuring that a bit for the upcoming school year so they can almost have sub-goals off of these district goals, and so we can kind of be looking at their benchmark data, their progress monitoring, and making sure that we're on the mark to be hitting those goals each year. The regions data, we are looking to increase proficiency 7.5% by the 28-29 school year, so that's 1.5 increase each school year, hoping for 72.77%. And what we did there is we took the average of all the New York State regions, and we certainly are looking at certain pockets, and again, having those triangular meetings with staff. So that is, in a nutshell, our 3 main instructional goals. If anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
So I had a quick question about the proficiency scores for the, how will the students, is there going to be like a campaign to make the students aware of what our goals for the students are so that they can be a participant in that track? Like, to make them aware? I mean, because they're the ones that have, how do we motivate them and make them aware of what we're hoping? Has that been thought about or
we did that more with the PLC climate survey data. It's not that we couldn't do it with the assessment data, we certainly could, but last year, you'll remember Elise Hoxie talking about this student group that worked with Mr. Oliver. That work is going to continue. Again, we've been focusing a lot on the climate and culture, and we can certainly bring in the assessment data. That wasn't the topic last year, but it, you know, now that we have these 3 main goals, I think it's easier to hone in on.
I mean, if they're aware and if you work together, I mean, I don't know, it just seems like I'm kind of old, I hearken back to the movie Lean on Me, which is quite old, but it's sort of what we're trying to do. We're trying to move the needle, you know, and that kind of they had visual issues of what they were trying to do, and the kids were involved in a part of that, and I don't know if that would benefit or if anyone had thought of it, but if they're not aware of what we're trying to do, I think we're going to have a more uphill climb, but just something to think about.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Any other questions?
I just wondered if maybe our ex officio might think about the positive climate is what I'm gonna call your goal number 2. I know that the last person was meeting with Mr. Oliver on regular intervals, and I just wondered if what was your goal or focus, if that was something that, you were interested in?
I haven't really spoken to Mr. Oliver yet, but like she said, I was involved in that group of things last year about the, I don't know if it was called the Griffin School group or something in regards to that. And we did meet, I would say once a month. We discussed like the climate in the school, and Mr. Oliver gave us a survey with numbers, and I was able to see. I do have an interest in definitely improving the climate in the school, but I think from the student perspective, as what I'm wearing now, it feels kind of hopeless because it feels like, I guess, a disconnect between the students' wants and needs and like what we think the goals are, and then what the teachers' wants and needs and goals are. And I think there's like a heavy disconnect in our thoughts and the teachers' thoughts.
So I think that begs to Kevin's question, which is, we've got these 3 goals. How do we communicate that to students so that they feel like their input is being listened to, and then they take ownership, and then they want to help improve? That's only going to make everything, more connected.
And I would just respond to you, Isabel. So I don't disagree that there is a little bit of a disconnect, but it was very interesting when the parallel committees were meeting. There was student conversations and there was staff conversations, and we had the school improvement team. And what came out of those in parallel conversations was the need for empathy, understanding, kindness, right? Like, so it was the same kind of power words. So there is respect, I think, was another really big one. There is a common understanding. I think perhaps a little bit of disconnect of how we get there. But the idea of just having 3 smaller concrete goals and having student voice, that's kind of what I was visiting with you quickly about before we started. Student voice does matter, and we want to continue to enhance it for sure. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The 2 remaining goals are non-instructional. The first one, and they really both do tie together. The first one is to work through the facilities committee with our architects to come up with a capital project referendum, which we would present to the voters by May of 2025. And corresponding with that, and this one is more of a mandate from the state of New York, is to prepare the plan for the eventual purchase of zero-emission buses and the installation of required facilities to power those buses. And those really are going to have to go hand in hand, those two goals. So from the non-instructional side, that's really where we're going to focus our energy on this year, is to get that up and going. We're already underway certainly on both of those, probably a little bit further advanced with the electric bus component. We've done our study, and now we just have to figure out how to implement. So, any questions on the non-instructional goals? Okay. All right. Then moving on to my next item, we have an agreement with the town of Massena for tax collection at the rate of $10,000 per year, which is in line with some of the other contracts from towns and schools where there is that type of an agreement. Any questions on the tax collector agreement? I'm also looking for the board's approval for an MOA with the Massena Federation of Teachers to establish the elementary musical director stipend, which was part of our strategic budget. As we know, Nightingale Elementary has had a very successful musical program for the past couple of years, and we'd like to extend that out to the other 2 schools, and to also, given that it's been done on a volunteer basis, is to move that into a stipend position for all 3 buildings. We also have a couple of field trip requests or bus requests. One is for Upper Canada Village from teachers at Nightingale for May of 21 and 2025. And we also have a request from PALS for September 14th of this year for a trip to Applewoods and Rensselaer Falls. And the final thing on my notes here is the acceptance of a donation from the Benevolent and Protective Order of the Elks for $4,000 to the Ready for School event. I certainly want to thank Emily Kimball and Kristen Colarusso Martin for making that happen with our local Elks Club. And Mr. Peretta, that's all that I have.
Thank you. Under recommended actions, we've got the consent agenda. If everyone's good to that, can we get a motion? Okay, any discussion? All right, do we have a show of hands? Favor? Any against? Carried. Okay. Other items. Number 2, appointment of interim board of trustee. Can we get a motion for that? So moved. Discussion. Okay. All in favor? Okay, thanks. That motion carries. Approval of the district safety plan 2024-25.
So moved. Second?
Discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Approval of district goals 2024-25.
So moved.
Anybody need to discuss it? Okay, all in favor? Whammo, that carries. Approval of the professional learning plan 2024-25.
So moved.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? That's all this. That carries. Approval of the tax collector agreement.
So moved.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Approval of the MOA with the MFT.
So moved. Second?
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Approval of out-of-country field trip request.
So moved.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? That's 5, that's enough. That carries. Approval of the bus utilization request from PAL, September 14th, 2024.
So moved.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Approval of the seeker request, resolution, sorry.
So moved.
State Environmental Quality Review.
I'll second.
Got that, Ashley? Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Bingo. Mr. Burke, we'll turn it over to you for the personnel action items.
And Mr. Peretta, I recommend approval of personnel items listed as 1 through 65.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Any new business items for further agendas?
I would like to have some sort of statistical information presented regarding LifeTrack. I'd like to see where we are at year one, and then, talk about what could be done with the statistical information, right? So, I don't know when that would be appropriate, maybe like a few months down the road.
I'm sorry, Trish, I didn't catch what you asked for, the statistical information on.
LifeTrack.
So
Oh, LifeTrack,
the
yes.
LifeTrack.
Yes.
And two, again, we were talking about communication with the ex officio. So in case you don't know, Isabel, we started trying to track our seniors beyond graduation to see if they were going to college, if they're going to four-year institutions, two-year institutions, if they're going to technical school, if they were going right out straight into the job market, those kinds of things. And also there was a bonus with that could help senior class advisors when you're looking for reunions down the road, students that already will be connected, that they could use that information, the school could use that, or the president of the class could use that information for reunion purposes too. So there was like a bunch of different things, and LifeTrack is what the corporation calls itself. So maybe on your end, since you are a senior, to be thinking about, okay, when would be the best place, maybe you're talking to Mr. Oliver, when would be the best time of year to get seniors engaged? Because you'll know better than most people how that, maybe work kind of hand in hand. And that kind of goes with school climate too. People be more ready to share their information if they knew that there was something that they were going to do to help others, because our goal is to try to help our graduation rates, and if we keep students engaged, that might be a way to do that. So I just thought I would mention that to you in case it was something that...
As you're speaking of that, Trish, is there a student assembly maybe, or a point where the students are gathered in here and that could be discussed, what LifeTrack and that whole thing means? So at least we'd have a less likelihood of, I don't even know what that is, or what it's about, or what it's for. I mean, that's one way to really get the message across, I think, and have them at least face-to-face encounter, not send them an email that they don't want to read.
Right.
Do you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, I agree. A lot of students don't check their email, and I can attest that I don't check it that often either. But I did have a question. Did you implement this last year?
Yes.
Okay, so I have not heard of it ever, but I'm not sure any seniors I know have done it either. How do you share the information? How do they share it to you? Is my question.
Sure, it has to be voluntary. So, and there's a survey, there's like a survey of questions that some groups from the school came up with. Some of us on the Board of Education chose questions that we were interested in, but there was like a huge menu, and you could choose just enough to be like a page long, like not a huge thing, you know what I mean? And then, since you're graduating, your current email will go away, so you would have to give that information, email, and then I think you can voluntarily, if you want to, if you prefer text messages, you could give your cell phone information, and that way, it's all voluntary. So it's not required, but what the goal, to communicate the goal is not anything other than how did we prepare you for for where you're going after graduation. And I'll just give you like an example. My son, he said when he got to college, there were a lot of his peers that had no idea how to really research and write papers. And he felt like this school gave him those tools, and he felt like he was actually helping them with that. So he felt like he was really prepared. That would be something I'm really interested in, like, was it because he was part of the IB program? Or was it just because our English department is doing really well? Like, it would be something like that. Are we doing well, and how can we do better, right?
So you won't, this is all completely new to you, and you're obviously, all of our perspectives change through time, so what we're trying to do is get a perspective from the seniors, and then it's 18 months out?
Yes.
So 18 months after you leave the school, we want to get your perspective then, after you've gone out in the world, whether you've gone to college or work or wherever. If we could keep the engagement, it helps tell us, or hopefully should tell us, what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, and kind of get to the key point of, as you said, you feel disconnected or whatever. It gives us some kind of feedback as to what we can do better, or to better serve the needs of our constituents after they've gone out and become adults and members of the workforce. And I think there's a 5-year, what is it?
Yes.
So it's a senior, 18 months after that, and then 5 years out, again, we'll reach out. So that's what we're hoping to do, just to try to understand it, because it's all gonna be new, you know. So I don't know if it's a senior high discussion, to give them some, so that they know about it as a junior maybe, or to know that we're doing something.
I think your idea of having this information to the mass senior group initially is good because, you know, we do our PLC survey. So this is a little bit on the same token in some regards, but I don't know if students always know why we're doing it. So I think we talk to our seniors about, yeah, we're going to ask you to do one more survey this year, but we're also going to ask you to give us some of your personal information, whether it be your cell phone, you know, your personal email. And the reason for that is we want to hear from you 18 months later, and again, 5 years out. We need to hear that back because your perspective changes over time. My least favorite teacher in high school, after about 5 years, suddenly became one of my favorite teachers just because I realized, yeah, he might have been a little rough, he might have been rough on me, but boy, look what I got from him now. And so I think, you know, you get that perspective, you can look back with a little bit of a different lens. And I think that, you know, this board is really interested in more than just a graduation rate. That's one piece of data. Regent scores are one piece of data. But what did we really do? And I think I've read Mr. Peretta's comments a couple of years ago when he was asking for this type of data, was really the idea of what did we really do? Are you really prepared for life? Are you prepared to be successful in college if that's your chosen path, or in the career, or in the military? And we never really are able to get that data, so I think this is one avenue for it. And I think, you know, we built and implemented last year kind of simultaneously. It's built now, but now we have to, I like that idea, and I wish I'd have thought of that. Kevin beat me to it. The idea of talking to Mr. Altman, figuring out a way to, we get all the students together early in the year and talk about this and drum it up, and give them some ideas of why we're going to look for that personal information. We're not going to ask you for donations, you know, when you strike it rich on your own after such a great education, but we just really want to know.
You know,
what are your thoughts?
Maybe as you just broaden that out, you have a meeting with the high school to discuss what the goals are, and then this becomes part of those goals. So that's where you get another bite at all of these things to get them involved with what we're trying to do. Just something to think about, you guys.
I agree, Kevin. I see it as all tied into exactly what Nicole was presenting, Ron. It's the school climate does have an effect on attendance. We know that. And it also has an effect on how well you perform. you know, how comfortable you feel in the classroom can change the way that you behave, right? So I think that it's a good way to tie everything together, and you know, I hope that you can, after you learn a little bit about it, that you can encourage, you know, your peer group to say, let's all do this, because what an interesting experiment. You know what I mean? Say you go to a high school reunion and you're like, well, what did you do and what did you do? This is a way for you to have that kind of connection, which will help future generations that go through here.
I've asked before about some way to engage. I know there's FERPA and things like that, but some way to engage the students. So we compete with other schools in sports, and we're all aware of it, and it's a whole sense of pride around the school and everything that we do. But how do we get that same sense when you're sitting at a desk and taking a class with the results as well? Because every student is on that team. So how do we push that message out? Because I think if we can start connecting all of those pieces, I think a lot of what your concerns are going to kind of mellow out. You won't have the issue will kind of smooth out, I hope. But just things to think about. All right. Anything else? Did any other public sneak in? Nope. Okay. All right. Can I get a motion for adjournment?
So move.